creating potentially dashboards, different reports to give to end users. It's all about kind of connecting that information across the data landscape. UK Sports Institute often gets referred to as the team behind the team. We kind of see like the performance data team as the team behind the team behind the team type
Yeah.
thing. So we're even behind that. I walked into the room and out of a class of 97 people, there was 6 girls and 91 boys. And that automatically felt like I was in the wrong room. Yeah, you can do the stats work for free, but
Yeah.
tools like Minitab and SPSS have buttons that you can press to do that for you, and you don't have to write the code. So it's all about trying to generate insight to help us make better decisions. Not many people know about it's within Excel. It's also within Power BI. It's kind of like a separate engine that runs, and that will change your life if you've not used it or heard of it. My bias is towards Power BI because it's a natural transition from Excel. It was absolutely fascinating, and I really did love that job.
Hello and welcome back to my channel, and today's guest is Lorna Belford. So Lorna is the Performance Data Lead at the UK Sports Institute. So a really cool job where Lorna works with other data professionals but also alongside a variety of coaches and athletes when it comes to sports performance. I asked Lorna about her journey to get to where she is today and also what she does day to day, but also around the different tools that she is using and also has used in the past in previous roles. So Lorna had a very interesting role before her current one, actually linked to golf. So I was really curious to see how she applied her data skills into that setting, testing things like golf balls and swing analysis, etc. So a quick reminder to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So if you've got any interest in sports performance, sports data, sports analysis, then this is the channel for you, where we interview cool people just like Lorna. And we've got some great guests coming up in the next few weeks too. So if you haven't already, please do subscribe, give the video a thumbs up if you do find value. But without further ado, let's get in the conversation with Lorna Belford. Lorna, welcome to the channel. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Chris.
Good, perfect. So we're nearly at Christmas, so I'm sure you're getting ready for that. I mean, you mentioned just before we started recording, you're still working, you're still quite busy at the moment.
Yeah, really busy actually. I think I mentioned that Paris is obviously not far away now, so I think we are ramping up with the last few bits that we can do to impact that Paris performance before it quietens down and everyone goes away and competes at the games.
Yeah, perfect. So what I like to do, Lorna, first thing we kind of want to do is pass it over to you. So for those that don't know who you are, just quick overview, who you are and what you're currently doing.
Yeah, so my name's Lorna Belford. I'm currently working as a performance data lead for the UK Sports Institute. Essentially, my job is to help all our Olympic and Paralympic sports with their use of data. So we know that data can be a really key thing in informing decisions, and we know that if we can make better decisions and have better actions off the better back of our decisions, then hopefully it'll make our athletes perform better and give us better performances at the games and in competitions. So my job is all about doing exactly that and trying to find ways that we can use the data. And when I say data, it's quite often people just think about numbers there, and it's definitely not. Like there's so much information. And actually we try to use the word insights a lot more than just data, because sometimes that data can be things like coach gut feel, which is really key. So it's all about finding ways that we can use that information and insights to effectively produce better performances at the games.
Nice. So first question off the bat then really is difference between data scientist, data analyst, data engineer. Where do they all kind of fit in? How do they work together? And also then on the back of that, once you've answered that, is do you have a focus? What was your background more in? So just curious to hear you answer that.
Yeah, it's quite a confusing landscape in terms of like job titles, to be honest. And there's some really good like Venn diagrams out there on the internet where people have tried to give really good descriptions to each of the roles. I guess in sports and in our world, we tend to think of we've got like a traditional PA role with your performance analysis role, who kind of tend to work as the right hand side to the coach and really provide that tactical insight that could tend to be potentially like video analysis or even competition analysis, really focused on the performance side of things. And then we kind of have this new role emerging within our Olympic and Paralympic sports, which we've termed as a data scientist. Again, that's quite a general term, and sometimes if you look into businesses and other industries, that can be a bit more descriptive. But in sports and in our world, we're tending to use that term of a data scientist to describe someone with a more general data skill set. So you wouldn't be necessarily focused on just the video or the competition results data, but actually focus on all the kind of data and information that's collected across the program. And you're actually a step back from the front line in that. So you're not potentially traveling and at competitions and on the training ground. You kind of sadly in the back of the office working away on your computer, tapping the numbers, creating potentially dashboards, creating different reports to give to end users. It's all about kind of connecting that information across the data landscape and preparing it in a way that means you can create like clean reports. So a lot of the data scientist work, I'd say, is kind of a cleanup job and a connect job of making sure that the data that you house is good enough to be used. Whereas that PA role would be traditionally like working alongside right hand side of the coach to really get out of the coach and work with the coach on the knowledge that they need in the performance in the competition environment. And then further beyond data scientist roles, you've got kind of like your back of house roles, even further back of house roles, I guess, of your data engineer, like you mentioned, where it just goes another level deeper. And those roles would tend to be, looking after the kind of databases, a lot of the infrastructure that's sitting there.
Yeah.
When you touch the surface on these things, quite a lot of people aren't aware of just what it takes to build sort of digital products and the teams that sit behind that. And actually, there is a lot of really skilled people that sit doing a lot of really cool things, just so that an athlete can enter some data into an app on their phone and it can appear on a dashboard or a report for the coach the next day, type of thing.
Yeah.
So it's a very confusing landscape and loads of different terms, but that's a brief description, I guess, of those three.
Yeah. Nice. So obviously, you mentioned like the differences between the traditional video analysts or performance analysts. That's kind of my background. So again, for those watching, I'm not a data analyst. I'm asking the stupid questions for you to find out. So that's why I do this kind of channel, to speak to people like you, Lorna, people with more knowledge on these things than me, because I do get asked a lot of questions about these kind of things and I don't know the answer. So that's why, we can, pleased to get you on, do a video just like this. So in terms of, you mentioned dashboards there, just for basic question in terms of that. So what do you mean by dashboard and what makes a good dashboard?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I think a lot of people automatically jump now, if they're in this space, to thinking of a dashboard as like kind of the tool that you're actually using. So it would have to be like Power BI, for example, or Tableau. But actually, in my mind, a dashboard can be as really simple as a report that the end user can interact with. So I guess it moves the difference between a report potentially is just a static piece of information that was a one time. So for example, you could take a screenshot of something and share that. A dashboard would then be kind of the live information that's fed into that. So the end user is constantly accessing live information per se and can interact with that information as well. I think that's the key difference. They can use like filters, drop downs, press buttons on the chart to get a bit more information behind the number, for example. So that for me is the key difference between like a report and a dashboard.
Yeah, nice. So just a little bit about the actual UK Sports Institute then. So for those that don't know, so can you give a bit of an overview on that? What's the purpose of that as an entity, and what kind of athletes are you working with?
Yeah, so people may, I think our name change happened a fair few months ago now, but it's a good one to go back to because growing up, I always knew it as EIS and as the English Institute of Sport, and obviously we've changed that now to better reflect the work that we kind of do with all sports, not just in England. But the UK Sports Institute is essentially a group of collected services that range historically were sports science, sports medicine, but have since branched out a lot further than that provide services to all our Olympic and Paralympic sports. But I guess to other sports as well now, that are competing in a high performance space. That might be at World Championships, at Olympic, Paralympic Games. So we provide kind of like a range of different supports to those sports. Really traditional things like S&C coaches, physio, medicine. But now you're getting into the likes of the performance data team, which I sit in. We've also got the performance innovation team that kind of do a lot of the Secret Squirrel Club work that is only released just a week before the games and kind of gives us a real big competitive advantage. So essentially, I always see it as a group of people that sports can tap into to help them get a competitive advantage against other nations.
Yeah, nice. So what we'll do then, Lorna, we'll just jump back to your education really. So, because one thing I get asked a lot about, again, my background is in football. A lot of people will ask me, can I be a football analyst if I don't come from a sport background? I've got whether it's engineering or physics, and that's what you did. Well, that's from looking at your profile, by the way. So you did a degree in physics at Swansea, although you did obviously go on to do your masters in sports biomechanics. But at what point did you think that you could use the skills and your knowledge to direct towards sport? Like, where did that come about?
It's a really good question. I hope I don't offend people with this answer because when I was at school, I really liked sport and I really liked maths and science. But My dad was actually a head of science, luckily not at my school. But I think having like a at-home tutor really helped me in that. Like, so I
Yeah.
really got on with science and maths, and I love sport. Um, and I think I just didn't want to be a sports scientist. I
Mm.
didn't know what I wanted to be, but I just knew it wasn't a sports scientist, and I knew I didn't want to go to uni and do sports science. I can't really tell you why. I just had this gut feeling. Um, Probably because that almost felt like I've been put in a box, if that makes sense. Of, oh, you like science and you like sport, you're going to be a sports
Absolutely.
scientist. I just didn't want that.
Yeah.
I didn't know what on earth there was out there working in sport that wasn't a sports scientist at that point. There weren't these roles that I see now coming out that I could kind of look to and go, okay, that's what I want to do. And so I chose to make a real conscious decision to study physics, to keep options really broad to me, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
I knew that if I did physics, I could, yeah, go into engineering if that's what I wanted. Potentially, sport just keeps as a hobby, or I could maybe still get into sports science if I wanted to, because if I'd managed to get through a physics degree, the likelihood is employers would probably still take me on as a sports scientist. So
Yeah.
I just thought studying physics might give me a bit of an edge and be something different. I didn't quite know what I was getting myself in for when I then went to uni, but yeah, that's kind of why I chose to go and study physics, I guess. And it's good advice I'd give to anyone now is try not to pigeon yourself into a hole as, you know, early on, because that gave me so much flexibility to be able to then choose what I wanted to do after that 3-year degree.
Yeah. So then you didn't do you didn't go direct to do your masters, did you? If the dates are around there, so was the gap, and were you working then, and why the gap basically?
Yeah, I guess the gap comes a bit back to that of like I really enjoyed my degree at the end. I got through, and yeah, I really liked it, but I didn't want to work in physics really, and I didn't want to. I didn't know what those jobs were. I didn't want to do engineering. I hadn't quite found the right job for me, so I just decided, and I was in a fortunate position that I could to go and take a couple of years out. And I actually am a big skier, so I went and worked and did 2 ski seasons abroad and lived in France for like 2 years, and it was like so nice to have a really good break after, you know, studying so hard throughout your whole education, to really digest like what I wanted to do and really have that time to like, yeah, just go and enjoy and relax a little bit. Yeah, enjoy living in the mountains and skiing every day. And
Nice.
yeah.
Nice. So then you've got it down here at Loughborough. Did you play netball? Were you playing sport then at that point as well?
Yeah, so I guess after I'd always thought I wasn't quite done with education after I went and did my ski season. I
Mhm.
could have stayed doing that for a long time had the pay been better, in all honesty, but it wasn't. So I, yeah, I knew there was like this calling to go back to education at one point, and went to Loughborough. And I am a big netballer. That is my sport, and probably one of the reasons it drew me to Loughborough, to be honest, was I knew how good their netball setup was, and I'd always felt like I wanted to. I mean, Loughborough Uni is known for its sport, so I wanted to go and give it a crack, and see what it was like. And yeah, decided to go back after 2 years out, which was quite challenging, to be fair.
Mm. Yeah. So, and one thing I did want to ask you about, Lorna, is so you are only the fourth woman that I've had on this podcast, and that's not by choice. I'm reaching out. I'm just used to rejection from women by it seems like that. So we've had on, and we actually bespoke before we started recording. Julia Wells has been on, who we work with Julia. And we've also had Amber, who's hockey analyst, and Lucy Rushton, football analyst, come general manager. So there's I just wanted to really ask you what it was like for you, kind of going through the pathway of education, then getting the role. I'm presuming your pathway has seen the same kind of issue of you're probably not an abundance of other women doing the same job. So how has that affected you and your journey? And just kind of maybe also give a shout out to other, because obviously we want that to change. Like if there's more people, if there's someone watching this now that thinks, is it a role for me because there's not many women? I don't really see many women doing it. So just kind of on that whole topic, really.
Thanks for bringing it up. It's a really like sort of passion point that I didn't realize I had until probably a couple of years ago. But my journey, for example, I guess it became very obvious to me. The first day I turned up to my first lecture at Swansea studying
Mm.
physics. I walked into the room, and out of a class of 97 people, there was 6 girls and 91 boys, and that automatically felt like I was in the wrong room.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like it's hard because there's no one actually physically telling you you can't do it, but society is sort of telling you you're a girl and you're studying physics. Like, really? Like, is that the right choice for you? And
Yeah.
like throughout my whole um university, so both at Swansea where I did physics and at Loughborough on the sports biomet, I only have ever had one female lecturer as well. So kind of thinking of jobs in that space, it was like, well, can I do, is that right for me? Will I, will I fit? Is that right? Just all this added pressure that I think you don't necessarily have to think about. If you're the people in the same room, you are the same as you, whether that's not just gender but race and everything. It becomes a challenge that if you're not aware of it, it can affect you quite a lot. So yeah, I had to battle quite a lot with the fact that like I was in the right room, and a really good saying that got me through was like, I guess it comes a lot to intelligence of like boys kind of naturally, for whatever reason, pick up physics and maths a lot easier than girls. I think research shows that, but that's probably because they're surrounded by role models and people that can do it, so they're not affected by those barriers.
Yeah.
And a really good saying that got me through was like, if you're the cleverest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. And I really like that. And I just kept telling myself, like, you're surrounded by these great people, just keep going, keep pushing. But it did affect me. And I wonder if I'd have had more female role models in the physics department at Swansea, would I have gone on to do that? Because I actually really loved particle physics. I mentioned I'm a skier. CERN, the big particle collider, if you don't know it, is out in Geneva. It's really close to loads of ski resorts, and what a life that would have been for me. But I think I felt like I couldn't do it, in all honesty, because the people around me were not the same as me. And like, imagine going and living, this sounds terrible, imagine living in CERN in Switzerland, sorry, surrounded by like traditional physics people. Like, it sounds terrible. I just thought, I'm not going to get on with them and I won't have many friends. So it kind of swayed me away. It sounds so like feeble, but that's the reality of where my head was at, kind of naively at early stages of my career. And it's not really got a lot better in sport, sadly. Like, there's definitely a massive increase that's coming on. We see a lot of females now applying for our data scientist roles, which is brilliant. So I think that's great, and I'm fortunate to have enough to have a really good line manager who is female and a really good role model to me. And that kind of gives me the encouragement within the performance data team to know that like I'm in the right room and I'm great, like keep pushing on. But when I've just finished a massive project, for example, which interviewed senior leaders from across the high performance system. So I spoke to performance directors, CEOs of Olympic, Paralympic sports, as well as like head of performance support roles that we have. So you're kind of senior leaders in all our Olympic and Paralympic sports. And out of, I think, 30 people roughly that we spoke to, only one was female. And again, if I'm sitting and looking at where I want my career to go to, and thinking I would like to move to those senior leadership positions, potentially, who knows? That's telling me that like the odds are stacked against you here, for whatever reason. So I think it's all about like being aware of it and then trying to put things in place that allow people to believe that they can do that. And there's so many good examples of that happening. But I guess the other point that I'm so passionate about on that is that it's not at the demise of men on that. Like, it shouldn't be the promotion of women over men. It's not about that at all. Quite often people get that really confused. Like, I'm not, you'd never want to promote a female over a male just because of gender. That's exactly what we're talking about is the problem there. It's just providing those opportunities and that societal pressure to allow women to believe that they can do it when men might have not had that. It's definitely about raising women up to the same level as men, not bringing men down to allow women to go up, in my opinion.
Yes. So. You mentioned role models. So you said your current boss is one of them, but obviously you didn't know them before you started. So did you have any role? You mentioned obviously your dad was a teacher. So was there anyone that you had kind of to push you along the way other than your dad?
Probably my mum is the other one. Like, weirdly, so she was a PE teacher, and so if you put my dad as a physics teacher and my mum as a PE teacher, you kind of get me, and it makes sense. So yeah, I think as well as that, there's the one female lecturer that I spoke about at Swansea who was physics was like a breath of fresh air to me. Again, I'm stereotyping, and it's terrible here, but a lot of people in the physics space struggle with your softer skills element to things. She walked in the room, and from day one of her lectures was someone who I could communicate with very easily and felt like she was a person before she was a lecturer. And that wasn't something I was necessarily getting from the male lecturers I had at the time. They felt a lot more like they were just chalk and talk, for example, and just did that. So yeah, I think that's it's I'm probably very inherent to my family being my main role models in that. But I am lucky that I have had people from different parts of my career that have impacted that way and allowed me to always believe that like you can do it. And I think that's why I'm in the position I am. But had I not have had those people, it would have been so easy at so many points to believe that I wasn't I wasn't cut out for this, not just because I'm female, but because, all those doubts that creep in at yourself at so many different parts of that journey.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, you did mention, I think it was before we started recording, that you're hiring at the moment there. Although when this goes out, that job may have been filled, but I'm sure there will be more jobs coming about. So if there's anyone out there that's, interested to learn more, obviously this video will hopefully help, but I'm sure people can reach out and kind of get some advice and get some kind of more insights into what the role is. And maybe, obviously learn from you, Lorna. So, I don't know when this will go out. It'll be sometime in January anyway, so hopefully. So what we'll do, Lorna, is we'll kind of jump back. So again, I've got your LinkedIn profile up and I've got a few questions that I'd like to ask you about when you were at the golf role that you had. So that was at RNA, so that's St Andrews Golf Course, isn't it? I'm right saying. So, right, I'm just going to read some of these things because some of these things sound quite random, but also interesting. So, you looked at the aerodynamics of golf balls. So you conducted comprehensive research on the aerodynamics of golf balls, exploring factors influencing their flight and characteristics. So, can you tell me something about ball aerodynamic that I don't know? To give me an interesting fact.
So I guess that one is my top tip is that golf balls. I don't know. Are you a golfer, Chris?
I'm a bad golfer, but I do like to play. Yeah.
So golf balls actually have a seam. So a golf ball is made by two parts and they are glued together. And there's a lot out there that if you align the seam up to where you want the ball to go, that will give you the best aerodynamics because imagine the seam is essentially flat. It doesn't have the dimples on. It's quite hard to spot and there's a real knack to it. I can tell you that's not true, sadly. It's not.
I thought I was going to fix my slice. I'm going to start aiming. Okay, so that's a load of rubbish. Okay. So, because I had it was a few episodes back actually, I had a golf analyst on, and that was really interesting. And not so much about the stuff that you've gone into there. It was more about kind of performance and stuff. But that was really interesting. But I mean, that's just one of the things I've got down here, Lorna. So the next one, golf robot analysis. So utilize a golf robot to investigate the impact of variables such as face angle, launch angle, impact location, and spin on the golf ball trajectory. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I guess my job up in Scotland was working in the equipment standards department. And people don't really know this, but there are rules on golf clubs and golf balls. So they all have to be tested and then they're allowed to go to market or not.
Yeah.
Now there's no you can sell them, but they can't be used in competition if they don't conform. And they're never going to test me and you playing locally at our club, but they are going to test Rory McIlroy's driver to make sure it conforms. And yeah, so I worked basically to make sure the rules. Well, I was the tester to test the tests. Okay. So we had people that would test the golf balls that were going to market. That was done quite, that was a machine line, a factory line that just, ran through. But my job was to find the loopholes essentially of if there were any, like what, how could you break the test? How could you get past it with a non-conforming golf ball? And you talked about the robot testing, and I had a best mate up in Scotland we called him Rab. Because in Scotland, Robert or robot is Rab. So yeah, he was called Rab. He was a he, and I just ran experiments, basically putting golf balls and golf clubs. If you've never seen the golf robot YouTube, it's quite funny. It is a robot that swings a golf club and hits it out the door. We had our own testing range there, and yeah, my job would largely consist of running experiments to try and test different things. Numbering golf balls, putting them on, hitting them hundreds of times, going out on a tractor, picking them up, putting them back on the same spot, hitting them again, just to see the effect of various different things. It was absolutely fascinating, and I really did love that job. Like you say, so many cool things, especially if you're a golfer.
Were you a golfer? Did you have an interest in golf?
Yeah, I've always played golf from a young age. So that's kind of why I took the job and moved up to Scotland. There's a lot of science in golf. It's really fascinating, and actually it kind of this is why I fell out of golf when I worked here, actually, because I found when I went and stood on the first tee, my head would explode with all the different things that I thought I needed to do. And
Yeah,
actually, now I've left that role. It's a lot easier to just stand there, hit it, and blame, whatever it is, rather than have to think it through.
yeah, nice, nice. The next one, I've got to ask you about this. I don't even know what it means, Lorna. So you've got coefficient of restitution testing. What is that?
So that is so drivers essentially there's a thing called spring-like effect. So
Mhm.
what I have to be careful here. What some of the organizations were trying to do was to a bit like the vapor flies and the alpha flies, the trainers that come in with the
Yeah, yeah.
car. Yeah, so they were trying to increase the flexibility of the face of drivers mainly to
Mm.
give the golf ball more speed coming off the
Yeah.
club. So there was a test that was put in place called the coefficient of restitution, and what that essentially measured was contact time. So we would have a pendulum that would swing and hit the club face and obviously bounce back off, and it would measure the time that the pendulum was in contact with the club face on.
Yeah.
And depending on, there was obviously a threshold for how quick that could be so that it wasn't deemed that the face was like a spring.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. These things go on in a barn in King's Barns that not a lot many people know about, but
Yeah.
most people's golf clubs will have been through well, one version of that club will have been through this testing to make sure it can go to market.
So where does the limits come in? Who sets the limits of what's allowed and what's not? Because I'm sure these manufacturers might try and cheat and like get past them and maybe stretch the limits as much as they can. So who sets them and how does that work?
Yeah, of course they do. Like
Yeah.
they, and don't believe all the marketing that you read about clubs coming out with this and that and golf balls coming out with this and that, because quite often it's just a marketing scheme.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's essentially the two governing bodies of golf, which is the RNA, so the Royal and Ancient Golf Club of St Andrews. Obviously, most people know that it's where the game of golf was essentially first ever played and where it was invented.
Mm.
And then the USGA, so the United States Golf Association. Between the two governing bodies, they both agree the rules and that the limits come into them. So the USGA have a mirrored department there in equipment standards, and we worked very closely with them to do. We do testing and they do testing, and we compare results on things.
Yeah, nice. And then the last one, you got turf testing. So conducted research in the field of turf testing, contributing valuable insights to enhance golfing experiences. So what kind of things are you testing for? What are you finding, and why is that important?
Yeah, so that was all about like really, really kind of green speed, I guess, was one of them. It's quite a common topic. I mean, I don't know if you're like me, but it really doesn't affect me. The greens are, you know, if I can three putt, I'm often quite happy with that
Yeah,
and I'll
yeah,
play. So a lot of it was turf testing, so really understanding how the golf ball rolls on the grass.
yeah,
Talking about some real interesting science there, but actually turf testing is not just common to golf. There's sports like tennis, for example, where they're really interested in how
yeah,
the ball interacts with the grass there as well. Again, sadly the downside is for people trying to find ways around the rules of things. So were they inventing golf balls, for example, that were easier to put because they had less friction when you were
yeah,
putting? I'm not saying that was a thing at all, but that's the type of hypothesis that we would test against. And yeah, I guess the other one is in the aerodynamics testing that we talked about, and actually it's quite topical at the moment. I don't know if you saw that they've recently just announced new rules on the golf ball too.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago. So just released new rules to say that they are going to restrict the limit that the golf ball can go a bit. So that's yeah, if anyone's really interested in this area, I'd say go and read
Yeah,
that work because that's just been released, and a large part of it is some of the work that I did while I was up there. But we have a model that essentially as we're trying to predict how far golf balls go.
mhm,
We obviously have a robot that we could hit out of the bay into the range, but we don't want to do that for every single golf ball and then have to go and measure it. So there's
yeah,
obviously things like TrackMan and GC Quads. They're all models, and it's all a simulated model of how far the golf ball can go.
yeah,
Obviously, there's two parts. There's the flight, but then there's the roll. So when the ball hits the ground, how far does it roll? And so a lot of the turf testing that I did was to try and understand how the ball interacts with the ground to then help create a better simulation of that model of how far it will roll. So putting different launch and like firing the ball with literally a cannon into the
yeah,
ground at different angles
yeah,
to
yeah.
see then what would happen.
Nice. Yeah, I think for me, it's more my game is more the texture of the sand or the density of the bushes or something like that. I'm not spending much time on the fairway, so
Yeah,
um,
I'm with you there.
so in terms of that role, then I want to ask you because you wrote down some of the things that you use, some of the tools that you use to be able to do your role, and I'm just curious to ask a bit about them for those that are listening as well. So and some of these again, so Matlab you've mentioned, Dan. I've never used this, so just for those that maybe never heard of it or very little knowledge on it, what is that, and why did you use that?
Yeah, so Matlab is a programming tool. Essentially, it's code. It's quite often used in academia, and not necessarily a lot in applied environments, mainly because the licenses are quite expensive, to be
Right.
honest. And there's actually alternatives available that are free, but it essentially allows you to work with data and to write code to transform that data, apply statistics to it, transformations to it, connect different things to it. Yeah.
And then was a Minitab as well. Again, news to me. I've never used this.
Have you heard of SPSS?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, we did that at uni.
That's so everyone's heard of SPSS. So a Minitab is another stats tool, essentially, exactly the same as SPSS. And actually, SPSS gets a lot of hate. Um,
Rightly so, I think. It was,
I do prefer Minitab. It's a much nicer user interface to interact with. It's an American software. Yeah, we use it there, and I actually take back the hate for SPSS at uni because like now in jobs, the problem is these tools cost money in our world, with government funded money, not an unlimited resource.
Hmm,
So there are things like Python and R which are free coding tools which you can do the stats work for free, but
yeah,
tools like Minitab and SPSS have buttons that you can press to do that for you and you don't have to write the code. And
yeah,
I'm lazy. If I can press a button rather than writing the code, I'd rather press a button. So actually, those tools are kind of very undervalued, I think, in
hmm,
the sports world for that reason.
yeah. I mean, I've never used SPSS since university. I just remember nobody knew how to use it, to be honest with you. So that's kind of my knowledge of that. So and then VBA for Excel. So was it Visual Basic for what is that? Is that like automation or something? Am I?
Yeah, kind of. It's not something I would recommend people use now, but I guess it's a really interesting point in my journey of how I ended up here because um we were doing a lot of work in Excel. Like, everyone uses Excel. Even if they think they don't, they often are for something.
Yeah,
And I started to realize and identify that there were things that we could automate.
yeah,
So I mentioned like the factory line of testing, and we had 4 or 5 great guys who, um, were doing testing and then manually typing in numbers and copy and pasting and doing that sort of thing. And I'm a big one for like time saving, and I'd rather invest time in learning how to do something better than just carry on doing it,
yeah,
essentially.
yeah,
And so I kind of explored the VBA, and it's basically a coding environment that sits in the back of Excel where you can put in code to be able to give you a bit more flexibility or automate things. That is, yeah, is a bit hidden away, but because I coded in Matlab, I then brought it in, and it's the first step I think in taking Excel and making that into like an application. So
mm,
like we all use apps on our phone, and it's sort of turning it from like a table where people enter numbers into some sort of something that people interact with through button pressing, like I said before.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that reminds me. So when I was did some time at Brighton Football Club, and there was a guy there, Chris. He's not there anymore, but he was like he came from a physics background. Actually, I think he did a physics degree, and he come from that background, and he was an absolute whiz on Excel, and everything that anyone needed to do, he could always just do it on Excel. Like he just knew everything about it, and he just had this massive like Excel encyclopedia, and everything you needed to do could technically be done on there pretty much. So perfect. So we'll jump forward now to your current role then, Lorna. So you mentioned performance data lead. You mentioned a little bit about this right at the start, but just again, just kind of recap the purpose of your role and also then what an average week might look like for you. What are you kind of doing day to day?
Yeah, so the purpose of my role, so I guess performance data lead is a real new term, to be honest, and one that we've made up. We've not taken that up anywhere. We have made that up as a team to try and describe what we're doing. So we are, as I said in the intro, I work with all our Olympic and Paralympic sports. Um, to help them generate insight to inform their decision making. Decision making is such a key part in this world, whether that's, you know, athlete selection decisions of who competes in competitions, or whether that's the other end of the spectrum, and that's athletes in the moment, in a game, in a race, what their decision making is. Often they're actually brilliant at doing it. You know, that's why they're elite athletes. So it's all about trying to generate insight to help us make better decisions, whether that's as a program, as a high performance system, or an individual athlete on their own. We collect so much data. I think probably the industrial revolution has gone on to be the digital revolution now, and it's gone from everyone just collecting everything, and now we're kind of at the stage of we need to be better at only collecting what we're actually using to inform decisions. So yeah, my job revolves a lot around that. And an average week, to be honest, one of the reasons I love this role is that it is so varied. And I imagine people say that a lot, and it's quite hard. But we kind of have, or in my role, I kind of have three-ish main areas that I work to. So one is direct project support for sports. So that could be answering a specific performance question, doing a piece of analysis, you know, an actual project like building a dashboard or report for them. It's kind of delivering a product to the sport. We'll often work quite closely with people in the sport to do that. So it's not about delivering black box solutions that they don't know what to do with. It's more about enabling and empowering the people within the sport to do it and then go on to do it in the future as well. That's one area. We then have learning and community. So this is an area where we're trying to bring people together and connect them, because the brilliant thing about data, but the really challenging thing about data, is that it touches everything. Whether you're S&C, physio, performance lifestyle, you know, whatever role you're doing in sport, coach, athlete, somewhere you're probably collecting some information and using it to help you do a process. And so this learning and community part of my job is all about trying to connect people on this topic, to help share ways of doing things, to help with productivity, to help solve common challenges. So we run things like, we've just run a data leadership program to bring people who are doing like data scientist roles in sports together, to share knowledge on how they're doing it, to share challenges, and to teach them some things that we might have picked up along our way. And then the last part of my job and what I do is what we call our initiative. So this is, we are, as a Olympic and Paralympic sport or system, we are in a really unique position compared to some of our big competitors, in the fact that geography means we're not actually that far away from each other. You compare us to the likes of, you know, States and China, for example. Actually, we're, you know, if we wanted to get somewhere within a day, we can. So connectivity is a real core part of our values. And in that is, there's a digital backbone that's required to kind of run a lot of things that, for example, you know, British bobsleigh, really small sport, but having a lot of impact, that they might not necessarily be able to invest in this data space on their own. But if they went join in with, you know, another like wheelchair fencing, for example, the shared things that we could do as a high performance system in that space. So that initiative space is all about trying to identify common solutions to challenges that our sports are having that they wouldn't be able to solve on their own, kind of in the digital space, I guess. So my average week consists of a lot of different team calls, to be honest. I'm online a lot, talking in various meetings. I might have a project to finish off in between those meetings. I might be scoping out another project as that goes. A lot of context switching between different things. So, you know, talking to curling on, you know, at 1 hour, and the next minute I've got to jump to swimming and think about swimming environment and what that is. So it's a lot of context switching, but I definitely love the variety and the different challenges that brings. I think it really helps me grow and learn a lot quicker.
I'm just curious then to ask about the other people that you are working with. Are you actually speaking with or communicating with the actual athletes themselves, or is the coaches between you? Are you dealing with like more elite stakeholders as well as coaches, sports scientists? Like what does that look like in terms of the variation that you deal with?
Yeah, to be honest, everyone is our customer.
Mm.
I'd say it really varies sport to sport as well. It's a
Yeah.
big data and digital area. Some people are really on board with it and want to throw everything at it. Other people are not quite sure and are a bit more risk averse and do we need that? Is it worth the investment type thing? So yeah, we work a lot with, I'd say main customers is like the practitioner level,
Yeah.
and leadership around that practitioner level, because um, we are athlete focused, so the athlete is in the middle, as an institute that is, and we are all providing the support around that athlete. And obviously, the coach is right next to the athlete there. So I'd say the UK Sports Institute often gets referred to as the team behind the team,
Mm.
in that they're the team that's directly behind the coach in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
We kind of see like the performance data team as the team behind the team behind the team type
Yeah.
thing. So we're even behind that.
Yeah.
And really, we work a lot with practitioners. We've obviously got the embedded roles that I talked about, so they're directly linked to us. And then I guess we're seeing more and more that, yeah, the athletes
Mm.
are into this, and we kind of predicted it would happen with just the fact that, you know, if you're under the age of 33, 34, 35, you've grown up with a mobile phone. Like you're used to having everything at your fingertips.
Mm.
So if you're an athlete now that's coming up through our pathways, you are so used to that being in your hand.
Yeah.
And when it's not, when they're in the performance environment, sometimes they're starting to question, like, well, hang on a second, like technology is not a barrier to this anymore. Like,
Yeah.
you know, can we do this? So yeah, we are definitely seeing an increased trend in our athletes, and working with more athletes and coaches as that generation moves through into coaching as well. And I think after Paris and into the LA cycle, that's only going to increase as well.
That's interesting because it links a little bit to a conversation I had recently with Dave Carolan, who's a sports scientist for many years, obviously kind of from the time when data didn't exist as much to now. And we were speaking about like the ownership of data in terms of the players. This is the football example again, but the ownership of players, but also then like comparing it to things like maybe in America where things like sleep trackers and stuff like that, where do you draw the line between collecting as much data as possible, but at the end of the day, it's a human being just doing the job. So I don't know if you've ever thought about, things like those kind of considerations.
For sure, it's a real like kind of in our SWOT analysis, it's a real opportunity, but it's a real threat as well of
Mhm.
just what that looks like. And we're definitely doing all we can to kind of educate ourselves on that area. And we've definitely moved into this space of winning well, which I think is really key there. Like it's not, I talked before about like my aim in my job is to just help people get the insight to inform better decisions so that we win more medals on the world stage. And it's like that is true, but only if we're winning them and we're winning them well type
Yeah.
thing. So
Mm.
we're not win at all costs. Like there is definitely like the last two Olympic cycles that we've had a shift to this like athlete centered, holistic support for that athlete. And we will always get athletes. There's always people that don't want the data captured on them, and I think it's always got to be their choice, and that's the key there
Yeah.
for sure. So we're doing a lot at the minute to try and educate ourselves on that. We're well aware of it. I think the challenge is that the world moves quicker than the regulations come in
Yeah.
or the guidance on that comes in. So that's a real challenge. Like I think EU only announced the other day that they've just written their AI guidance, and
Mm.
AI's been around for years and years. It's
Yeah.
only now they've put some guidance in place. So yeah, it's a real area that like we're aware of for sure, and thinking about how do we combat that. And I think the key to that is like athletes being involved in that conversation, right? It's done with them, not to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. So, okay. So the next things I want to ask you about, Lorna, is questions mainly for people that are listening that want to get started and stuff like that. So two tools that I see a lot of people use, Tableau and Power BI. So if we start with Tableau, kind of, can you just give your perspective of a quick overview of what it is, why it would be used, and maybe some tips for people to get started using Tableau as well?
Yeah, of course. So Tableau is a data visualization tool. So it helps you to, I always say, like a good way to think about it, I read somewhere is you not present data in tables, present it in color and in pictures,
Yeah.
essentially. And that's what Tableau can help you to do. There's a couple of different parts to Tableau. They've kind of evolved their support of it. So it used to be purely visualizations. So I'm sure everyone knows in Excel, if you had data, you'd go to that chart button and you plot the charts, and they look let's be honest, awful. They're terrible. Like they're not great. If you did it in Tableau, automatically it's like you've been given a helping hand in how to do that better and make it look more professional. They also have parts to it called Tableau Prep, which is the tool that can help you do kind of like the cleaning of the data before it goes into the visualization. So you might have data, for example, on two different tables that you want to visualize in one visual, and you would connect those two tables in Tableau Prep. Like that's where you kind of do the cleaning and the merging and the prepping in that stage before you took it into Tableau to visualize. And then there's quite a few different arms to Tableau, but then there's a way of like sharing it with your end users, through Tableau server, and that's how you could get like athletes, for example, to then access it through that point.
Yeah. So if I wanted to get started with Tableau with no experience, what would you say to me? How would I go about
that? I would say quite often people tend to jump in and just start, which I don't think is bad advice at all. It depends on your personality profile, probably. I like some structured formal learnings. I would get signed up to like there's so many free resources out there. Because what you don't want to do is jump in and start learning bad habits from day one. Like you want some sort of guidance on what to do. So some really good YouTube channels are out there that you can go to. To be honest, the Tableau website is actually probably best for Tableau. They've got free resources on there that are quite quick, that you can go through, like an introduction to Tableau Prep, what it is, that, to be honest, are no more than a couple of hours. And I think once you've done some formal learning that gets you to a point where you have got your feet on the ground, you know what buttons to press to navigate around the screen, then I would say start applying it. So then start using it, practice away with it, like give yourself a challenge. There's loads of free data sets that people put all over Twitter, especially in sports data. Sports Viz Sunday is a really good one. They give you kind of like a data set and it's a challenge to create a visual. They give you a month to do it, for example, and you can put that out into the world and let people comment on it, give you feedback, but you can also see what other people are doing and learn from how they've done it. And there's loads of cool things you can do. So I think that would be my advice, is get some structured learning first of all, so you know you're starting off on a good foot, and then just practice and try and do the practice in an applied way, so you're not just learning theory. You're actually like going, right, I'm going to try and build a visualization on, I'm a big Everton fan, so let's say Everton's progress in the last, since we've had our points deduction. It's a wonderful thing. And then produce that visual, like go and collect your data, clean the data, see what you can produce, and then get feedback on it and go again type thing.
Nice. So, because again, relating it back to football, because that's what I know, a lot of people, like data in football is pretty, you can find it with it being so popular. What about the other kind of, like, for example, the Olympic sports and stuff? Can somebody find data online for different things like that? Is that doable?
Yeah, sure. You'd be surprised at what's out there, to be honest. Quite often it's quite funny, really. Olympic sports and Paralympic sports are quite often have a results website, that is run by just someone who is kind of passionate about that sport and has the data skills to do it. So I know that for more than a handful of sports is the case, where it's just someone who has just off the bat gone and done it and built it up and has gone, I'm going to give everyone open access because I want them to help me to realize this dream of like increasing, the success of our sport. Because I guess that's the other thing with Olympic and Paralympic sports, is they're quite often at threat of like being dropped from the Olympics. It happens or changes. So I think it's quite a small community, actually. So I'd say if there is anyone that's really interested in like a particular Olympic, Paralympic sport, go and find that community, connect to it. You'll be surprised at what kind of data. I'm talking mainly about results data rather than athlete data that you could get your hands on and start to do some insights. And you never know where that could lead, especially in terms of like jobs.
Yeah, definitely. So that was the question of did Tableau. So then Power BI next. So how does that compare? Is it a different tool? Is it an alternative? How can people kind of get started with that?
Yeah, so Power BI is like Excel's older, I want to say brother, but then that's like a default man. So we'll go like older sister. Like it's essentially has a lot more capability than Excel does. And you talked before about how brilliant Excel is because it can do so much. That's kind of part of the problem as well, is that people are often using Excel to do things that there's far easier ways to do them in tools like Power BI or other tools, to be honest. So Power BI is a Microsoft product. The desktop version is actually free with a Office 365 license. So depends if you've got that, but if you have, you can download Power BI and try and have a go in it. And again, it's a data visualization tool. It started out life as a data visualization tool, but it started to migrate now into a lot more, to be honest. And I guess that comes from its Microsoft family. You know, Microsoft putting a lot of money into their digital, and that's their lifeline, that's their product. And there's like various different things that you can do, not just with Power BI, but with the other products that are attached to it now. So there's like the Power Platform where you can build actual like applications. So whether that's on your phone or on a web app, to display your data and show that reporting and analytics. So they're very similar tools, Tableau and Power BI, and often it's like a personal preference of what you prefer. Because of the role I'm in and the fact that we support 42 sports who all use different tools, I have to know both and I have to be comfortable at that. But I would say my bias is towards Power BI because it's a natural transition from Excel. You don't have to learn. Everything looks the same. You know, even if you open it up, file, edit, home, all the buttons across the top toolbar are in the same place. And it's got kind of, I talked about it being an older sister or brother, and it's kind of got this middle child in the middle, if you like, called Power Query, which not many people know about. It's within Excel. It's also within Power BI. It's kind of like a separate engine that runs, and that will change your life if you've not used it or heard of it. It's so easy to use and can do so much in terms of just transforming data, cleaning data, adding columns, performing calculations, grouping, merging. It's really easy to use. Anyone can pick it up, and it, like I say, it can probably solve the things that if you do it in Excel, you're writing some god awful formula to do that then gets lost because you've copied the wrong cell over. So yeah, my bias is probably towards Power BI for that reason, that it comes with Power Query, but Tableau Prep is an equivalent to that.
So in the, maybe not you specifically, but well, you said you've got to kind of be aware of all of them anyway. But so that both of them are getting used day to day by the different people. And what about the stuff you used, the golf, the Matlab? Are they still used as well? Do you use them now, or?
Yeah, that's a real challenge, to be honest, of the high performance system and the landscape. So, like sports are free to use whatever we call it like a tech stack that they would want to use. And there's various benefits to that, but there's also drawbacks in that then it just means you can't share best ways of working and stuff. So Matlab is used by some departments and teams, like Python is used, R is used, Power BI is used, Tableau is used. It's a real complicated mess of like technology, to be honest, that is used across the high performance system. And I think it's not as easy as if you are a business, like, you know, you run a business and you just decide, right, we're going to use this technology to that, and that's what we're going to use, and going forward, that's it. You know, we're ranging from people on Microsoft to Apple to Windows, like we're Windows, OneDrive, Dropbox. There's just so much to use, and there's no real conformity across the high performance system of Olympic sports in that.
Yeah. So in terms of that tech stack, then, if you're working with a new sport that maybe hasn't a preference, do you then guide them to what you would like? If they've got nothing in place to start with, are you going to kind of, is there a preferred thing that you would want them to do if they had no preference? Or?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's and that kind of is my role, is to play that consultant role to the sports. Yeah, it depends where they're at in their like data journey, to be honest. Sometimes, in fact, more often than not, what they're trying to do, they can do in Excel, and then that's probably best for where they're at. We'd never really push anyone to do something just because, like, there needs to be a performance reason for that, whether that's the performance of the dashboard, the reporting, the analysis, or that it's going to have greater impact because the adoption's higher because a report looks better in Tableau or Power BI, for example, than it does in Excel. Or that it's easier to share. So yeah, I'd say we definitely do make recommendations, but what we tend to do is actually just give the sports the information that they need to then make that decision. But that's best for them.
Yeah.
It can often come down to cost in all reality of between the two. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So one thing I had noted down to ask you, Lorna, was I think you shared it on LinkedIn. There's a couple of different articles on different kind of sports and stuff. So the one I've got open here is about diving. So diving today to how British diving are gaining a competitive edge. So I don't want to put you. I don't know if you know much about that article or how much you know about it, but just to kind of, because I had a quick read through it before we started in terms of what the purpose of it is and kind of the changes that you guys are making to make it seems like to make the data more accessible to coaches and athletes and things like that. So if you what you can share about that article in particular in terms of the diving example.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess the context of the diving one is that swimming and para swimming, to be honest, have been kind of early adopters in this space for us. They've done so. Our team has actually been around for quick math 6-7 years.
Yeah.
So and swimming and para swimming to some extent, where people that their leadership and the people on the ground were right in like from day one, like we think we can get a competitive advantage if we invest in this space. Like, can you help us? And maybe like just over a year ago, the three main aquatic sports, so diving, paraswimming, and swimming, merged to be run as one performance unit. So they would share kind of like, it would no longer be that you're just a physio for diving, for example, you would be a physio to diving athletes, paraswimming, and swimming. Share the resources across those three aquatic sports. And the same thing happened in the data space. So swimming and paraswimming had invested quite a lot, and actually diving hadn't. So it was like all about, okay, how can we bring diving up to a level that matches where we're at, and how can we do it quickly with the lessons that we've learned from having to go on this journey with swimming and paraswimming in the first place. And in the article it talks about Tom Shaw and Ollie Logan a lot, and they really are the two trailblazers within that environment, along with their teams who have pushed this forward and got their leadership to endorse their vision on this and sponsor their vision. So the diving project was kind of an easy sell, because basically we were like, look, you get these insights for your swimming athletes and to make decisions on swimming athletes. You get these insights for your paraswimming athletes. You don't have it for diving. Would you like it? And it created a gap that when it became apparent, it was like, yes, we would like that. How quickly can you do it? So that was all about results data. It's such a key thing in our world. We are all judged on how those athletes perform, whether it's at World Championships, at World Cups, at Olympics, Paralympics. Our sports should have the results data of the scores that the divers did, for example, at the competitions. And what tends to happen within our sports that we see a lot of is there's a really good website where they can go to get that information. So they'll copy it for the one event they're interested in. They'll stick it in an Excel file. They'll call the file name, World Cup Budapest 2019.
Yeah.
It'll live in that Excel file. They'll do some analysis on it. It'll sit there. Someone else in the sport does exactly the same thing. So we've now got two different copies of these Excel results.
Yeah.
Two people have done this. Where productivity here is low because we could have saved time. And swimming and paraswimming have both built systems that would negate that happening. So it was all about diving basically doing it, and the reaction from the diving crew in terms of the coaches and the athletes and the senior leadership team there, they've really bought into it, because it's such a small change that's really impacted how they make decisions within the sport, for example. So you have to, as a diver, you have to decide what combinations of dives you're going to do. So there's a certain difficulty, like a risk and reward element to it. So do you, for example, you've just been in the training environment, you've done a new skill, do you risk doing it in competition knowing that your execution score might drop? And so they could look at kind of the analysis that their competitors were doing to understand if they had the room to make that change or not, and then it informs the decision of which dives are we going to perform at that competition. Are we going to actually just stick with what we know because it's too risky that we might drop out the medals here, or no, we're gonna go for it because there's actually, we think, the leeway that if we do drop an execution, worst case scenario, we're still going to be in the medals, so let's take it on, and best case scenario, we're going to win gold. So yeah, it was like it's nothing new, it's nothing like crazy. It's just providing the people who are making those decisions access to the information that they need
Mm.
to hopefully make better, more informed decisions.
Yeah, perfect. So one thing I do like to ask everyone is, and you've already kind of touched upon a little bit, Lorna, is advice for people. So obviously we're getting to by the time this goes out, it will be the new year. People make new year goals, resolutions. One of them might be to get competent with data analysis or whatever. So if you could give maybe 3 points for the total novice that wants to get into sports, analysis, sports data analysis, what would they be for someone to kind of try and get started?
Nice. 3 points. I would say number one, and it might not be something anyone else has said, is have a look at job descriptions that are going out there.
I
Um,
say this all the time. People just,
yeah,
yeah, it's so undervalued. Yeah, definitely.
it is.
Carry on.
You'd be surprised at how many people I see applying for jobs when we do recruitment campaigns, and I question if they've even read the job
Mhm.
description. Yeah, like know what the skills are and the experience is that you'll need in order to get the job that you ideally want to do,
Yeah.
and plan your development journey out to then hit them if you're not hitting them. I think is the best advice. Like I knew that my physics degree would not hold up if I applied for a sport job. I might somehow get through, but they'd probably be wondering what the hell I was doing applying for a job. Hence, I did the biomech masters. I went into sport and did that. So I think that's my best advice. Is that really worked out for me? So I'd always pass that on of like planning. What are the skills that you need? Look at the job description, read it, and then yeah, plan backwards from that of like, okay, how are you going to expose yourself to get that experience? How are
Mm.
you going to develop the skills that are not necessarily strong enough if you can't apply for that job yet? Um, yeah, so I think that would definitely be one. I think two would be to read and explore the internet as much as possible because there is so much out there in terms of resources, especially with ChatGPT now, right? Like you can literally in a really natural way, you can ask any question and get sometimes like a decent answer back. Might not always be perfect, but it's somewhat decent. So there's no reason that you can't go and explore and find out more about topics of interest to you, especially if you're starting out in this world. Try and do like a bit of an analysis, I guess, to figure out what jobs are out there and which one you think fits to you, and use that internet, use like ChatGPT to dissect it into a language that makes sense to you. I guess if you're struggling to understand that, I think would be two.
Mhm.
And then I guess three is probably to not be afraid to network and connect and reach out to people. I think that goes a lot further than people say it was, and it's something that like I really haven't. I really was afraid to do it up until the past sort of 6 months, and so many people will be willing to help you and give you exposure to experiences that the saying goes, you don't ask if you don't get type thing. What is the worst that can happen? Someone doesn't reply to you or it doesn't end up working out. There's so many people out there, so many interesting people, probably loads of the people on your podcast series and stuff that people can reach out to and connect with to give them some advice. I'd always be open to a half-hour chat. Like it's never a bad thing. It works both ways. Companies and people will be looking for candidates when they have job opportunities come up. So it's not a bad thing to have already had that conversation with someone and to get to know them and learn from their advice and not be shy to do it. I think that's three off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, three very good ones. So I always also ask if point number two, you said kind of read and kind of learn as much as you can. Is there any books that you would recommend, any website and so two parts of that question, one from the data analysis perspective, but then just in general, any podcast, things that you consume that you think other people would find value from?
Yeah, I guess in the data analysis space, it's not like reading. There's no nice stories out there, unfortunately. Um, I have a Bible probably that sits on my desk, which I got when I first started this job that helps me with like data viz, and that's data visualization by Andy Kirk. He's someone that we've done a lot of work with and has a really clear set of instructions of how to build good visualizations. And I think I see so often where people haven't taken the time to read resources like that. And, visualizing your data sometimes is everything. So yeah, that would be one in terms of the data analysis space. one that has really, like, I guess going back to that earlier question, there's a book out there called Invisible Women,
Mhm.
which is all about a gender bias in data, and that probably sparked a lot of thoughts for me in terms of how the world works. And yeah, it's just a really fascinating read that is less data analysis, but is more on that topic of just how do you explore that topic of how things in society are sadly, and to no fault of through men and male behavior, aligned to men more than they are to women. So that's a really interesting read. And I think they have a chapter in there about football stadiums and the way that toilets in football stadiums, for example, there's always a queue for the women's toilet, but there's never a queue
Yeah,
for men. But
yeah,
there's probably 5% of the
yeah. It's true.
audience are women. So how can that be? Like, it's yeah, really interesting reads. They're probably two books, and I guess I also have subscribed to a website or just a mailing list that's TLDR, that just fires daily updates through to me of things that are going on in the tech world. And I find that really interesting. Yeah, it's always a good one to just try and stay up to date with a world that is moving rapidly.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Nice. Thanks for that. I'll link them below for anyone that wants to check them out. Well, now I've gone through every question. We've actually been going over an hour now, so I'm close to your time. But anything else you want to give a shout out to? Anything at all that you want to? And how can people find you? You're on LinkedIn, you said, so people can reach out on there.
Yeah, of course, happy to connect. Please do, like, if you're interested in working in the Olympic and Paralympic world in the data space, especially with Paris coming up. Like, I'm sure people are going to watch those Paris games, and even if you're like, an engineer by trade, or working as an analyst in a finance company right now, but you love sport and want to get involved in sport, there is definitely jobs out there for you within sport that you can go and add value to. So if you're interested in a route into that, especially in the Olympic and Paralympic world, like, yeah, please do reach out. I'm more than happy to share what I can know about the industry.
Nice, nice. Well, that's been amazing. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. Have a really good Christmas, and I will. Yeah, I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks. You too, Chris.
Thanks.
Cheers.